Welcome to Mastering with Ozone 101. Ozone came out about 8 years ago. I believe the first version was Ozone 3. And it's a program and it works standalone and it works as plugins in your DAW. Cubase, any of them, FL Studio, Logic, all of them. So what I aim to do today is to give you the basics of how to master your own song without having to go to a mastering engineer. Now, don't discount mastering engineers because they do a really good job. But in a lot of cases, you can get close or just pretty much the same as what a mastering engineer would do with this technology. So we'll cover the equalizer, the dynamics, the maximizer, the setup, standalone operation, exporting, and everything that has to do with Ozone. Okay, stay tuned for the next video. The first thing you want to do when you open Ozone would be to set it up. If you had just installed this program, it kind of guides you along setting it up, but I'll go over the settings anyway. So let me drag the settings over here. So what you have in the general is enable module meters, show tooltips, dim controls when bypassed. Module preset manager follows module selection. Check for updates. Enable analytics. Master assistant level authorization. So the important parts on this page would be analytics. That is, if you want Ozone to know what you're doing, they kind of monitor what's going on so that they could fix problems if you do have any problems. The history depth. This is a big one. The history depth is going to let you undo and redo, and it lets you do it 100 times. You could set it to unlimited. I just leave everything at default. The master assistant loudness target. This is what happens when you select the streaming algorithm. What's going to happen is it's going to try to make it 14 dB, and 14 dB is the standard for Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, so I usually leave that at default. Everything out of all of these modules I leave at default because that works for me. So we'll go to the spectrum, and this is where you can decide if you want your spectrum to be filled, meaning instead of having just a line, you will see a line of what the audio is doing and it filled in. Show peak hold. I use none of the above. I just kind of leave it stock. You can change your equalizer settings, your dynamics, your imager, your dynamic EQ, your exciter, and here's your IO. You can enable meters, disable meters, show true peaks. I'm going to click on show true peaks. And then your plugins. Now your plugins, when you start up the program, these boxes aren't enabled. So if you want to use VST plugins, you'd enable this box and then hit a scan. If you wanted to use audio unit plugins, you'd hit this box and then enable a scan. If you need to add a plugin folder, this is where you would add it. So I could go add, and it comes up with whatever. And let's say I choose downloads here. I can hit open, and I just added a plugin folder. But there are no plugins there, so I'm just going to delete that, remove it. And your app, this is just some more settings that I don't even worry about. Okay. So the only thing that you would really have to do is set your audio driver. Now I'm using the Movavi Sound Grabber because I'm using the Movavi sound grabber to capture what I'm recording right now. But if I were just doing this for me, I would use the Element 24 because this is my Apogee sound card. And that is pretty much how you set up Ozone. In the next video, we're going to go into the layout, and we'll go over that. When you open Ozone, this is the window that you are presented with. And it has the Master Assistant presets, going to the beginning of the file, stopping, play, pause, next track or end of the file, playhead follows playback, loop, undo, opens the history, and settings. When you come down to the bottom, you'll see the different modules. These are Ozone modules. So if I click to add one, I go over here, you'll see that we have an EQ missing, a dynamics, and a maximizer. We can add a vintage EQ. We can add a vintage tape. We can add an exciter. It only allows you to add 6 modules, so you have to choose your modules carefully. So I'm going to get rid of those. We can also add plugins. So I can go to T-Rex and add a compressor. I can go to UAD and add a flanger, even though I don't own this flanger. I can add a tape or whatever else I have. I don't have many plugins because I tend to only install the plugins for AAX because I use Pro Tools, and I right now don't have any other DAW on my computer. So we get rid of those. Now down here, we have a bypass, a gain match, a dither, reference codec, a stereo mono button, so you can listen to your mix in mono or stereo, a left swap left and right, and these we'll get into in a little more detail in a later video. So that's basically, we have our faders, so we can move our faders. We can even click this button which separates them, so I can move them individually. And the same thing goes for the output. Move the faders, separate, I can move it individually. I can click and hold the Option key and it puts it back, or the Alt key if you're on PC. I can put those back, group those back together. I can change the resolution. If you look in here, as I do this, it changes the resolution. Okay. All right. Did I miss anything? Okay. No. Okay, on to the next video. Okay, we're going to look at importing files. Now, I have one file imported, but let's say I wanted to do an EP or an album. I can just come here, hit plus, and I added a file. All right. And what you'll see is when I click on it, none of these modules are going to be there because it's going to be separate. So now I'm starting from scratch. But let's say I have more files. I can do them one at a time, or I can just grab, let's say I grab from, yeah, we'll do it this way, up, and we'll go down to here, and we'll just grab these. So it analyzes it, because Ozone right now is set to 48 K, and so these files aren't. So it analyzes it and it resamples them and it adds them. So you can have all these files in here. So if I play this one, switch.
I woke up in Japan.
So basically, as you can see, I can work on each file in my album. So that allows me to get them to sound similar. All right. So everything that you do on one, you can do on the rest. Everything is separate. And that's the beauty of this program, where you're able to do this. And if you look, you'll notice everything's like super loud these days. Okay, nothing is, back in the day, it used to be a lot lower. Songs used to look like this back in the day and sound like this as far as loudness. But now everyone wants everything super loud. But that's how you import your files into Ozone, and you can work on them all separately. Okay, I've imported a file, Spanish Chicks, into Ozone. There are 3 ways to import a file. One way is to go up to the file menu, which you can't see in your screen, and hit File, Import Audio. The second way would be to hit this plus button right here and find a file and import it that way. And the third way would be to just drag a file in, which is how I usually do it. I just usually drag it in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the Master Assistant. And first, before you use the Master Assistant, you want to put it to the highest part of your WAV file. As you can see, my WAV file is pretty even, so I don't have to do that. But if I were, it would be, well, what I mean is I'm just going to put it about right here. Okay. So I go to the Master Assistant. Streaming is if you're going to send it to Spotify or